As a doctor, I have always believed, and I still believe, that there is a cure for every disease. Every disease is a mystery, which has not been completely unraveled yet, while unraveling mysteries is my sideline or hobby. I love antiques a lot, especially those that have remained valuable and attractive. These things have stood the test of time and now they are timeless. Many of these things, created by men of genius, are enigmas that have not been puzzled out yet. The feather in the cap for my career choice as well as my hobby belongs to my father. When I was 13 years old, my dad asked me, back then, when you were a child, you read a fairy tale named The Tale of the Fisherman and the Goldfish written by A.S. Pushkin. What do you think? Is it just a fairy tale of good and evil, of gratitude and ingratitude, of intelligence and stupidity? What do you think? Perhaps Pushkin encrypted a deeper meaning in the tale that you did not understand. Think about it. I gave it a hard thought, however, as nothing came to my mind, I finally gave up. I did not find any riddle or secondary meaning in this tale. Father laughed and offered me some suggestive questions. Why does the tale begin with the words, "Once there lived an old man with his old lady"? Why does the tale say, "And they lived on the verge of the bluest sea"? I understood perfectly well that my father did not just say it, but I could not find the encrypted meaning or figure it out no matter how hard I tried. My father's suggestive questions helped me nothing and confused me even more. I could not pick up on the connection. The beauty and poetry of the fairy tale made it impossible for me to find the key to the given riddle. I do not remember for sure how long, but it took me a fair while. Maybe a few months had passed until I gave up completely and asked to be explained on what I was not able to understand myself. Explanations that my dad gave me turned my private world upside down. I realized that I was looking at the world with my eyes closed, and, therefore, could not see much of it, perceiving a lot as ordinary and simple, not seeing a hidden meaning. I realized that men of genius are geniuses because they know and see a lot more than others. I realized that things made in the past and that are extant are better than modern things because they have stood the test of time. It is quite difficult to say which ones of the present day's things and works will stand the test of time and remain valuable. Our descendants. Still, there are brilliant people at any time. We must learn to see and appreciate them. A cipher of the tale was very simple, it was just there, lying on the surface, and only the lack of depth in my knowledge of life did not allow me to understand that. The tale begins with the words, "Lived with his old lady," because, as the fairy tale goes, the old lady, as she acquires power and wealth, no longer sees the old man as dear and close to her. He becomes unnecessary and superfluous. While the bluest sea, which does not exist in real life, turns into a black sea. 2 words and a simple children's story at the time have changed into a vivid life situation for me. I then became more mindful of that which seems simple and ordinary. We can go on and on talking about Pushkin's fairy tales and about the invisible information they carry. In fact, there is only one word beginning with the letter F in The Tale of Tsar Sultan, and this word is fleet. The reason for this is that most words beginning with the letter F are of a non-Russian origin. And thus, many years hence, I took interest in one of the mysteries of Leonardo da Vinci. The British newspaper The Telegraph quotes reasoning from the Mirror of the Sacred Scriptures and Paintings World Foundation, following the results of research on the paintings and drawings of Leonardo da Vinci carried out by the foundation. The scientists working for the foundation argue that Leonardo da Vinci encoded sacred images in his works, including the image of the Old Testament Yahweh. The scientists of the Mirror of the Sacred Scriptures and Paintings World Foundation sent the results of their research to the Vatican. The method that the scientists applied to study the paintings and drawings is quite simple. By placing mirrors in different planes on the works of Leonardo da Vinci, they received a mirror reflection of the images from different standpoints. Thus, in a famous abbazzo with Maria, Saint Anna, infant Jesus, and the boy John the Baptist, when placing mirrors in a certain way, it can be seen in a mirror reflection of the picture that the boy John the Baptist sees Yahweh instead of Jesus. A similar effect can be observed when looking at the painting the Mona Lisa when placing mirrors in a certain way in her right hand. You can see an upturned cup of the Holy Grail in a mirror reflection of the painting The Last Supper. You can see a mystic, four-legged symbol of man's creation and the paradise tree in a mirror reflection of the painting John the Baptist. For me, these studies only confirmed what I knew. Leonardo da Vinci encoded many things. He wrote with his left hand and could write in incredibly small letters, even from right to left. What is more, he turned all the letters in a mirror image. He spoke in riddles and metaphorical prophecies, adored making puzzles. Leonardo never signed his works, but they bore distinctive marks. There are, apparently, a great deal of such signs, and for that reason, some of his brainchildren have been suddenly discovered through the centuries. That was exactly what happened with Madonna Benoit, which strolling actors had been carrying along as a home icon for a long time. Leonardo da Vinci invented a principle of scattering, or sfumato. The objects in his canvases have no clear lines, everything is just as it is in life, it is blurred, things penetrate through one another, and therefore, breathe, live, and awaken imagination. Leonardo da Vinci advised exercising in such scattering, looking at spots emerging on the walls due to the damp, ash, clouds, or dirt. He intentionally fumed the room with smoke where he worked to seek out characters in puffs. With the sfumato effect, a shimmering smile of the Mona Lisa was born, when, depending on the viewer's focus, it seems that the heroine of the picture either gently smiles or predatory grins. The second miracle of the Mona Lisa is that she is alive. Over the centuries, her smile has been changing, and the corners of her lips are raising higher. Similarly, Leonardo da Vinci blended knowledge of different sciences, so his inventions are eventually finding more applications. The beginnings of the science of penetrating force come from the treatise on light and shade, as well as oscillatory motion and wave propagation. Leonardo da Vinci preferred the analog method to all others. Analogy's ruggedness is an advantage over the accuracy of syllogism, when two conclusions inevitably follow the third. But there is one thing, the more bizarre the analogy is, the further the conclusions made from it extend. Assuming, at least, the famous illustration proving the proportionality of the human body. With outstretched arms and legs spread, the human figure fits into the circle. While with closed feet and raised hands, it fits into the square. Leonardo da Vinci seriously studied sacred geometry. His Vitruvian Man has become one of the most famous works. This was an illustration for the book, which he dedicated to the architect Marcus Vitruvius. The first thing that strikes in his Vitruvian Man is that we know there is something important in him. Perhaps, we do not know exactly what it is, but still, this drawing contains an enormous amount of information about us. The center of the circle, described around the body, is exactly in the navel. If the center of the circle is moved down to the center of the square, it is possible to observe the following interesting patterns. The length of the extended palm from the wrist line to the tip line of the middle finger equals the distance from the top of the head to the upper point of the circle. The same length equals the distance between the navel and the center of the square. Leonardo da Vinci discovered that the phi proportion can be found in thousands of places across the whole human body. The length of each phalange of the finger is in phi proportion to the next phalange. The length of the forearm is in the phi proportion to the length of the palm. The length of the shin is in the phi proportion to the length of the foot. The length of the hip is in the phi proportion to the length of the shin. The same proportion is found across the whole skeletal system. A whole cascade of phi proportions is found across the human body. Now it is my concern to unravel the mystery of the phi value. I have always believed, and I still believe, that the golden mean lies at the heart of struggling against any disease. The Vitruvian Man, in which Leonardo da Vinci defined the center of the human body through the method of calculation, bore one more mystery. I have viewed this picture and saw it not as a picture that depicts one man, in one instance inscribed in a circle, and in another instance, inscribed in a square, but as images of two people, one being superimposed on the other. This thought of mine was born out of the idea that such a great scientist as Leonardo da Vinci was not likely to overlook the difference between the proportions of a male and female body. Therefore, proportions of a male and female body should be combined in this picture. Consequently, two different figures are displayed in it, the images of which are superimposed one on the other. Cross-references and schematic drafts of the Vitruvian Man image led me to an interesting discovery. If we imagine that the square depicts a male figure, and the circle, a female, then, in a styled image, we can see pictures of X and Y. The X image is in the square, while the Y image is in the circle. This may be indicative of male Y and female X chromosomes. Leonardo da Vinci created this drawing as an illustration to a book devoted to the works of Marcus Vitruvius. The very figure is entirely based on the description from Marcus Vitruvius's treatise. Nature saw about the structure of the human body with the following proportions: the length of 4 fingers equals the length of the palm, 4 palms equal the foot, 6 palms make 1 elbow, and 4 elbows make the height of man. 4 elbows equal a step, and 24 palms make the height of man. If man straddles legs so that the distance between them equals 1/14 of man's height, and raises hands so that the middle fingers are at the level of the head top, the central point of the body, equidistant from all the limbs, would be the navel. The space between straddled legs and the floor forms an equilateral triangle. The length of outstretched arms will equal the height. The distance from hair roots to the tip of the chin equals 1/10 of man's height. The distance from the top of the chest up to the head top is 1/6 of man's height, while the distance from the top of the chest up to hair roots is 1/7 of man's height. The distance from nipples up to the head top is exactly 1/4 of man's height. The greatest width of shoulders is 1/8 of man's height. The distance from the elbow to fingertip is 1/5 of man's height, and from the elbow to the armpit, 1/8. The length of the entire arm is 1/10 of man's height. The starting point of genitalia is just in the middle of the body. The foot equals 1/7 of man's height. The distance from the foot toe to the kneecap equals 1/4 of man's height, while the distance from the kneecap to the starting point of genitalia also equals 1/4 of man's height. The distance from the tip of the chin to the nose and from hair roots to eyebrows is the same, and, just as the ear length, equals 1/3 of the face. This is a translation of the passage from a book called Architecture, belonging to the great Roman architect, engineer, and writer Marcus Vitruvius, who lived in ancient Rome in the early years of the 1st century AD. There is an entire section devoted to the proportions of man's body in this book. All these proportions he used in his architectural structures. The same text is accompanied by the drawing of Leonardo da Vinci, the Vitruvian Man. I knew that Leonardo da Vinci took interest in the golden mean during his collaboration with Luca Pacioli in 1496. Leonardo da Vinci made illustrations for a book of a famous scholar and monk Luca Pacioli called The Divine Proportion, 1509, Venice. Before the book was published, secrets of the golden mean, division, had been jealously safeguarded and were available only for the sanctified. Leonardo da Vinci, seeing the proportion in the life around him, originally gave it the name, the golden mean, which has survived until the present time. The portrait of Mona Lisa was written by him, completely meeting proportions of the golden mean. Raphael's picture, Massacre of the Infants, has a spiral in the proportion of the golden mean. In the rough sketch of this painting, you can observe a red spiral, extending from the center of the point where the soldier's fingers are closed around the baby's ankle, along the figure of the child, the woman cuddling the child, the warrior with the raised sword and, then, along the same group in the right side of the sketch. Studying paintings of great artists, I was not aware of whether they divided the canvas area and the theme of their pictures into sections proportional to the golden mean, before setting up to write them, or they just scented this proportion. Perhaps it is this sense that determines their genius. John Kepler, who lived 500 years ago, once said, Geometry owns two great treasures. The first one is the Pythagorean theorem. The second one is a division of the segment at the extreme and mean ratio. However, it applies to proportions in architecture, painting, wildlife. What I was interested in was a purely narrow field, particularly it was how to use the principle of the golden mean in medicine for patient treatment. In China, the third-generation doctors are considered the best specialists. This is due to the fact that diagnosis and treatment experience is transmitted within families, from generation to generation, and a good doctor is likely to appear only in the third generation of doctors, who has sufficient knowledge in diagnosis and treatment. In my family, there are far more than 3 generations of doctors. That is why I decided to turn to the experience of my ancestors. Amongst other things in my father's archive, I came across a description of a treatment method, which I later called the synthetic method of Dr. Berlin in memory of my father. He used this method for the first time in 1954, and further, he constantly developed it. Seeing many shortcomings of modern medicine, Dr. Berl, my father, began to look for the answers to arising questions in the so-called conventional medicine. For 1,500 years, the medical views and teachings of Dr. Galen, who lived in the second half of the 2nd century AD, had been the unquestioned authority, supported and legitimized by conventions of the Church. All that did not comply with this teaching represented non-conventional, complementary, additional, medicine. Galen's medicines, plant and organ essences and effective agents segregated out of them, replaced histotherapy with herbal therapy. The traditional Chinese medicine, numbering many hundreds of years, was not recognized as a method of treatment. Homeopathy was barely breaking through its way to recognition in Europe. The views of Dr. Berl were highly influenced by scientific works of the founder of osteopathy, Andrew Taylor Still, as well as the works of his students and followers, especially by the works of William Garner Sutherland. The described by him mechanism of primary respiration, based on the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid, became the basis for a new treatment method proposed by Dr. Berl, which, afterward, I called Berl therapy. This method has combined methods of conventional and non-conventional medicine, and, basing on them, created a new approach in medical practice. The first description of meninges can be found in the 3rd century BC in Herophilus of Alexandria, Hierophile, who gave the name to dura mater of the brain and pia mater of the brain, and who discovered a network of vessels on the brain surface, sinuses of dura mater, and their confluence. Erasistratus, who also lived in the 3rd century BC, described brain ventricles and foramens that connect the lateral ventricles to the 3rd ventricle. Later, these foramens were given the name of Monroe. Dr. Galen made an in-depth description of maters and brain ventricles, but he denied the presence of the space between velamen in the spinal cord. Pulsation of the brain made him assume that there is a space between brain maters. Since Dr. Galen did not find fluid in brain ventricles, he, therefore, believed that they were filled with some kind of an animal spirit, spiritus animalis, which created respective humidity in brain ventricles. Scientists, who lived in the 17th and 18th centuries, had fairly comprehensive studies of brain and spinal cord anatomy, and their names were immortalized in the discoveries made by them. Lateral foramens, connecting the subarachnoid space with the 4th ventricle, are called Luschka foramens. The name Monroe, 18th century, was given to foramens connecting lateral ventricles with the 3rd ventricle. The name Pacchioni, 18th century, was given to granulations in sinuses of dura mater, which Pacchioni was the first to describe. He was also the first to surmise the existence of their secretory function. But all these scientists were studying and proving the existence of cerebral fluid and its circulation in the brain. In 1770, Cutugno first described the circulation in cerebrospinal fluid. According to him, the fluid circulated in the brain and spinal cord through intrathecal spaces. Ventricles of the brain were connected with the intrathecal space of the spinal cord, and one space was an extension of another. He was also the first to indicate that brain and spinal cord fluids had the same composition and origin. Cutugno's works were undeservedly forgotten, and Only in 1825, Magendie quite comprehensively described the subarachnoid space of the brain and spinal cord, brain cisterns, a connection of the arachnoid with pia mater of the brain, perineural and arachnoid sheaths. However, his works did not receive full recognition as well. A famous anatomist, Dr. Virchow, did not accept transmittals between brain ventricles and the subarachnoid space. Not only the anatomical structure did rouse a fierce debate in the scientific community, but also the physiological role of cerebrospinal fluid remained unclear and mysterious. Virchow, 1851, and Robin, 1859, having explored walls of brain vessels and spinal cord vessels and their maters, pointed out the existence of grooves around blood vessels and capillaries of a larger caliber, ranging outward from their own adventitia of vessels, the so-called Virchow-Robin grooves. Quink, by injecting dogs with plumbus orthoplumbate in arachnoid, subdural, epidural, and subarachnoid spaces of the spinal cord and brain, and examining the animals after some time, observed, firstly, that there is a connection between the subarachnoid space and cavities of the brain and spinal cord and, secondly, that the fluid flow in these cavities was in opposite directions, but more powerful went bottom up. Finally, Kay and Retzius, 1875, in their work gave a fairly detailed description of the anatomy of the subarachnoid space, interrelation between the maters, with vessels and peripheral nerves, and laid the foundations of the physiology of cerebrospinal fluid, mainly concerning its movement. Certain provisions of this work have not lost their value so far. Studying the works devoted to the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid, Dr. Burrell noted that many researchers point to the existence of circulation of the fluid in perineural spaces as well. Therefore, wherever nerve fibers reach, the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid follows. Though, even now there are different opinions on the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid, and the point of view concerning circulation in the cranial direction is not accepted by all scientists. Due to the pulsation of intracranial arteries, cyclic changes in pressure in veins, respiratory cycles, body positioning, relaxation and contraction of muscles, and many other factors, gradients of hydrostatic pressure are built in the cavities where the fluid is, and, as a consequence, its circulation. Many researchers have discovered, and are still discovering, a dependence of intracranial pressure on breathing and blood pressure. This confirms statements of doctors of the 18th century on the existence of respiratory and pulse brain movements, Magendie, 1825, Ecker, 1843, Longuet, Luschka, 1885, and others. Large arteries of the brain. Base, as well as cerebral arteries in their entirety, pulsate, creating conditions for pulse movements of the whole brain. Respiratory motions of the brain are connected to the exhalation and inhalation phases. During inhalation, cerebrospinal fluid flows away from the head, and at the time of exhalation, it flows to the brain, resulting in changes in intracranial pressure. As soon as Dr. Burrell got acquainted with the works of D. Giorgio, 1929, 1943, and many other authors, he saw that cerebrospinal fluid and brain extract from donors with damaged brain and spinal cord had an effect on the recipient. Moreover, recipients developed the same symptoms with flexion of the same limb and on the same side as the donor. The possibility of transferring symptoms from an affected animal to a healthy one, or from a person to an animal, was proven. Supposing a puncture of cerebrospinal fluid is taken from a person with a stroke and injected into the spinal canal of a healthy animal, the animal will develop symptoms of disorders in the limbs on the same side, as in the human patient. In the case of a right-sided stroke, the symptoms will appear on the left side, and in the case of a left-sided stroke, the symptoms will appear on the right side. Nowadays, chemical factors have been detected in cerebrospinal fluid that carry information about which side of the brain is affected, causing posture asymmetry. These factors act differently on neurons on either side of the brain's longitudinal plane of symmetry, supporting the existence of a mechanism that controls brain development and cell movement from left to right and right to left relative to the body's longitudinal axis, a phenomenon that has recently been termed chemical asymmetry. Since the 1940s, Dr. Sutherland's craniosacral concept has been widely recognized in the United States. From the early 20th century, osteopaths have paid increasing attention to the flow of fluids in tissues. This emphasis has not only been on free circulation and lymph flow, but also on the unhindered movement of intracerebral fluid, cerebrospinal fluid. Dr. Burrell's treatment method, proposed in 1954, differs significantly from applied kinesiology, created by George Goodhart, who previously practiced osteopathy and was involved in chiropractic. The core principles of Burrell therapy are based on the following. The meridians, channels, used in traditional Chinese medicine are conjugate points of interaction and circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. Stimulation of biologically active points, as used in traditional Chinese medicine, is essentially an impact on the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. All types of massage affect the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. All types of therapeutic exercises, including kinesiology exercises, impact the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. Any impact on a person, whether physical, psychological, or a change in posture or position, affects the circulation and pressure of cerebrospinal fluid. Based on these principles, Dr. Burrell suggested that, when treating various diseases, the following should be considered. It should be noted that Dr. Burrell's approach is applicable to all diseases. Acting on the flow and pressure of cerebrospinal fluid can restore the patient's health. The therapeutic value of biologically active points, which have been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine, represents developed treatment methods that impact the body through changes in circulation and pressure of cerebrospinal fluid in the peripheral parts of the human body are influenced by historically established, and now well-known, reverse reactions. The therapeutic value of different postures, used in Indian medicine, such as yoga, etc., represents developed treatment methods that impact the body through changes in the circulation and pressure of cerebrospinal fluid in the peripheral parts of the body, with a known reverse reaction. In different countries, people traditionally sit in various ways due to cultural practices. Some squat, some use chairs, others sit on their knees, cross-legged, and so on. Depending on the way we sit, the load on the spine and the circulation and pressure of cerebrospinal fluid change. Therefore, different nations may develop or avoid certain diseases based on their seating habits. People from different countries also consume different foods, consisting of various substances that affect spinal fluid, which contributes to the development of different diseases in different nations. Allergic reactions, vaccine therapy, and many years of experience in homeopathy confirm the active biological effects of small doses of drugs. Dr. Galen's approach, which remains relevant in modern life, emphasizes treatment with individual components of plants rather than whole plants, such as alkaloids, flavonoids, glycosides, tannins, vitamins, essential oils, fatty oils, and microelements. However, this approach contradicts the essence of a rational world order. Each plant was created to treat a specific disease, and the whole plant should be used for treatment rather than its isolated parts. The human body consists of two unequal halves. Not only is there anatomical asymmetry, but there is also chemical asymmetry in both the brain and the body. Leonardo da Vinci's painting The Vitruvian Man is not only an encrypted image of a pair of sex chromosomes but could also indicate body asymmetry. It can be assumed that the two sex chromosomes create unique, interdependent connections during body development, with each chromosome being responsible for one half of the body. This could explain the presence of asymmetries. Muscle movement is one of the main factors influencing the circulation and pressure of cerebrospinal fluid in the peripheral parts of the body. Stable, fixed, and specific body postures are key factors influencing the circulation and pressure of cerebrospinal fluid in the spinal cord and brain. The ability to think and the highly developed second signal system, oral speech, provide wide opportunities for self-regulation through self-hypnosis or meditation. Human consciousness involves the fusion of two I-s, the speakers and the one who feels and reasons. The two I-s result from the brain's special regulatory mechanism. Both hemispheres of the brain function in balance, with impulses from the right hemisphere controlling the left half of the body and vice versa. The right hemisphere governs the development of perception and emotionality in life, while the left hemisphere is responsible for logical thinking. As a result, new information is processed in the left hemisphere, and recognition of already known information occurs in the right hemisphere. Balanced work of both hemispheres manifests in the left hemisphere's analysis of events and the right hemisphere's synthesis. Many observations and developments by Dr. Burrell remain effective today. Dr. Burrell developed and applied 12 special body postures and combinations in the treatment of patients with various diseases. When combined with self-hypnosis, the statistics of improvements and healings in these patients exceeded 62%. Dr. Burrell's ideas about the leading role of cerebrospinal fluid circulation disorders in various diseases have been confirmed by modern scientific discoveries. It has been proven, through experiments where cerebrospinal fluid from sick individuals was introduced into animals, that certain endogenous, internally generated, substances, regulators, mainly interact with the left or right brain hemisphere. This leads to a one-sided physiological response. Researchers are striving to identify these regulators, study their mechanisms of action, and form hypotheses about their biological significance, as well as to outline ways of use of these substances in medicine. Burrell therapy is application of specific therapeutic postures along with acupuncture, herbal therapy, self-hypnosis and homeopathic remedies while treating different somatic and visceral diseases. Osteopathy and homeopathy were obstructed from a widespread, legal use in the former Soviet Union, what made it impossible to promulgate and disseminate this method. The value of cerebrospinal fluid circulation disorders in development of various diseases was considered as an alien bourgeois theory in the USSR. It started from the very moment when I happened to read an article in the internet. It was called The Mystery of Unsolved Murder of Yuri Pang. Not only was the article a bewilderment for me then, but it was also the beginning of events described in this book. In my father's archive, which I inherited after his death, and which, by sheer luck, and luck is a pseudonym of God, as so said my father, I was able to take away when immigrating outside the former Soviet Union, I found a thick gray folder bound with a rope in a crosswise manner. That folder contained 3 drawings made on yellowed with age paper. The drawings were bound with a big antique iron clip. There was also an explanatory leaflet with a typewritten text on it attached to them with the same clip. According to the text, these drawings were made by the artist Yudovin, and were given to my grandfather as a present for treatment the author received. He also said to my grandfather, that, taking the cue from other artists, Rembrandt, Da Vinci and others, he encrypted a message in those drawings, which was involved with one historical mystery, the answer to which he had not managed to find yet. Together with the drawings, Yudovin gave my grandfather a ring with a stone where letters of the Hebrew alphabet were marked. I knew about those paintings as far back as I lived with my parents in Kharkov. My grandfather, my father and I myself tried many times to find the encrypted information in the drawings, but our quest was not fruitful. The pictures remained kept in the folder, since it was very challenging to put them in a frame on the wall in the Soviet period. The scenes from the Jewish town's life, shtetl, from Yiddish, a Jewish town, depicted on them, which are a unique example of integration of Jewish population into the Ukrainian environment while preserving their own national culture, not really belonged with the state policy of assimilation of the Jews. The only thing that the artist let my grandfather know was that he was let in on the secret by his uncle, Anskai, in 1906, when his uncle brought him to study at the Vitebsk School of Drawing named after U.M. Penn. According to the artist, his first teacher was killed because of this secret. Anskai himself learned the secret at the banker Polyakov's, when he was still studying at Heder and was invited to celebrate the Sabbath at Polyakov's. Throughout his life, Anskai had been trying to unravel this mystery, but he never succeeded in it. The only thing, that Solomon Borisovich Yudovin said, and later my grandfather took down what he had heard, was why he gave that very ring to my grandfather. Dented health prevented Solomon Borisovich Yudovin from engaging in engraving on wood. More and more he was turning to tonal drawings in pencil and pen. 3 of those drawings were the ones that were presented. As for the ring with the stone, the following was told. The mystery in question concerns an old-time legend about the ring with an amazing stone, which saved Benjamin's generation in exile and helped them return to the earth of Israel en masse. According to the legend, the ring was made of 5 metals overnight. The ring is to be made by an ancient formula, and can be made only once a month, or 2, depending on the month, on the night following the full moon from 1 in the morning to 6 in the morning. The upper part of the ring is made of pure gold. There is a layer of lead and tin beneath it. The last layer is copper. The ring itself is made of silver. All metals must not contain any contaminants, otherwise there would be more than 5 metals in the ring. The mystery, referred to in the old-time legend, centers around the fact that the ring must be embedded in the gold plate, the 6th element, which is a special oval stone. The legend goes as the stone is a light gray color with the Hebrew letters on it. Moreover, these letters are not marked down by man. A distinctive feature is the presence of a combination of 2 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, Yud-Hey, in this impossible-to-read inscription. As we know from the Torah, this is one of divine names. The God revealed himself to Moses under the name, consisting of the letters Aleph-Hey Yud-Hey, and under the basic name, consisting of the letters Yud-Hey and Vav-Hey, which are the name of God. The commonly used word Hashem means the name. According to the legend, Benjamin lost the stone in one of the battles. The stone was beaten out of the ring by an arrow. The ring saved Benjamin's life, but the stone was lost. Henceforth, the stone fell into the hands of the knights of the temple. There was little known about afterlife of the stone, except for that it ended up on the territory of modern Ukraine. This legend was told by a rabbi, one of the guests, while celebrating the Sabbath at Banker Polyakov's. Ansky found the legend so much interesting that he decided to set about a search of the stone. During the expedition, in one of the towns, Yudovin decided to take a picture of an old-time konokia, a special candlestick used during Hanukkah. He asked the rabbi of the synagogue, who showed him the candlestick, for permission to gently clean it from a layer of wax candle snuff, with the rabbi as a witness. Never before had this old konokia been used in the synagogue, and no one could remember when or how it had appeared there. As soon as the konokia was cleaned with hot water and a rag, to everyone's excitement, it turned out to be made of pure gold. Yudovin, remaining tight-lipped about the incident, was then given an old gray stone by the rabbi, which had Hebrew letters depicted on its surface. The old man said, "I hope for your honesty. If anyone finds out about the wealth we hold, the candlestick will be taken, and we are likely to be killed. Our community is very poor, and the gold will be used for the benefit of all members of the community. You were sent to us by God. On behalf of the community, I beg you not to tell anyone about the finding. For you, I wish to give you this old stone. It has also been kept with us since the creation of our community and is transmitted from a rabbi to rabbi. According to an ancient legend, this stone was brought to the community by a man, who accepted Giyur in our synagogue. According to him, he used to be the knight of some kind of Christian order and ran away after his order became subject to Roman Catholic Church persecution. This stone is to be transmitted from generation to generation along with a message that it should be given to one of the descendants of Benjamin's generation. Our community is small, as is the town, and new people are very rare here. You go to many places and towns, perhaps you will meet a man who is a descendant of Benjamin's generation. Should you meet the one, give him the stone." The only person who Yudovin showed this stone to was his teacher, Pen. Pen became extremely excited about the stone and even depicted it in some custom-made portrait. Yudovin suspected that Pen was killed because of this picture, and that Pen, even under threat of death, did not give away the owner of the stone, who he saw the stone with. Perhaps, the police department office that had been following the expedition eventually received the information and a description of the stone, and the archive with the information fell into the hands of a CSS, KGB, officer. Having overheard in conversation that my grandfather was from Benjamin's generation, and see my grandfather having our ancestral ring, Yudovin handed him the stone. My grandfather and father spent a lot of time studying the stone. There are 4 main advantages of an original gem: beauty, rarity, longevity, and uniqueness. Stones which lack any of these properties cannot compete for being considered precious, although this does not necessarily mean that they cannot be used for decoration. People have always been interested in gems and valued them for their beauty, rarity, longevity, and uniqueness. Precious stones are minerals that are quite rare, have a beautiful appearance, and, as a consequence, are expensive. They are widely used for jewelry production, gathered in collections, and used as bank assets. In addition to external beauty, gems attract people with their properties. For a long time, stones have become talismans and amulets, giving their owner protection from good forces, developing talents, and tempering the character. From ancient times, there has been a belief in the magic of precious stones, and it has been scientifically proved that every stone is connected to a certain planet, and the planet in its turn, to man's health and destiny. Precious stones, falling within the 12 generations of Israel, and 12 signs of the zodiac, have received the utmost spread. Amulets and talismans with such minerals have been worn and are still worn on arms and chests, in pockets, or hung inside homes. Jews preferred stones corresponding to their generations. Egyptians adorned themselves with amethysts, emeralds, turquoise, while Romans favored diamonds. The Renaissance brought along fashion for topazes, sapphires, and rubies, the era of Romanticism, a flash of interest in semi-precious stones. The Jewish stone, or as scientists call it, graphic granite, has never been described as a stone falling within the 12 generations of Israel or the 12 signs of the zodiac. According to Sefer Yetzirah, the creation book, each letter of the Hebrew alphabet, each zodiac sign, one of the 12 generations of Israel, any feeling, and any part of the body correspond to each month of the Jewish year. Before the stone came to my grandfather's hands, my grandfather and my parents never knew about the Jewish stone. They only knew that according to an ancient legend, it was the very mineral the second Moses tablets were made of. It is believed that in ancient times, plates of the Jewish teacher's stone, this is another name for graphic granite, were used for teaching how to read. Another scientific argument for a true-to-fact confirmation of the legend. Besides the appearance of the stone, is the antiquity of it as a mineral. Geologists believe that its age equals the age of the Earth's crust, about 3 billion years. Thus, this stone is quite suitable for keeping writings of the Revelation on it. The history of this particular stone and Benjamin's ring was previously unknown to us. While we were aware of the ring made of 5 metals from the ancient Kabbalistic formula for protection and success recorded in Sefer Refuvhaim, the Healing and Life book. The ancient Kabbalistic text says that the secret of success of the ring of 5 metals lies in that at a special time, when the ring is made, Jupiter's influence is involved. Jupiter is a planet of growth and development, and the power of success is the strongest at the time the ring is made. None of the known sources could prove the presence of the 6th element in the ring in the form of the Jewish stone. Consultations we received from geologists and gemologists allowed us to find out other names for this stone: the Jewish spat, graphic granite, teacher's stone, the Jewish stone, or Hebraic granite, granite pegmatite. This is a relatively rare kind of pegmatite, in which, due to multiple nucleations of quartz crystals on a field spat crystal, naturally germinating into each other while simultaneously growing, a structure is formed which highly reminds of the Hebrew writings. In ancient times, many nations considered it a sacred stone. Among barbaric peoples, it was polished and used as a protective amulet. There are many ways gemstones are formed in nature. Some result from strong mountain-building processes, including tectonic movements, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. Others are products of settlements from the waters of mineral sources or slow burial of ancient forests. Almost all gems are associated with certain rocks of the Earth's crust and are divided into three major types: igneous, magmatic, sedimentary, and metamorphic. Igneous rocks are formed during the cooling of magma in the Earth's interior or on its surface from lava erupted through cracks or volcanic vents. In the process of slow cooling and solidifying of magma, as the concentration of dissolved elements in the melting increases, crystals of minerals begin to grow. If these processes occur at great depths, crystals can reach significant sizes. If the processes occur on the surface, crystals are usually small, as lava hardens very quickly. Large, well-shaped crystals grow in cavities and open cracks where they have plenty of space for growth. Some magma, solidifying last and enriched with vapors and gases, forms pegmatites. The structure of pegmatites is extremely uneven. They often contain giant crystals, weighing several tons and having lengths of tens of meters. Pegmatite veins are one of the most important fields of jewels and the main primary source of moonstone, pink and smoky quartz, beryl, and spodumene, kunzite. Pegmatites with precious stones belong to acid igneous rocks rich in silica. Minerals that do not contain silica, such as diamond, ruby, sapphire, and spinel, are crystallized in basic rocks. This is how scientists, geologists, and gemologists explain the formation of pegmatites, and they believe that they are one of the most important sources of jewels. However, the physical properties of the stone do not explain how it acquires the property of influencing people, their lives, and its connection with the higher worlds. According to the Torah and the Bible, God created the earth and everything that inhabits the world. Just as He endowed His soul in every human being, He put in every stone its purpose. Only God, who created them, knows what He put in them. What we can do is study the properties of God's creations, but only at the level available to us. While the level of knowledge is infinite, so is the idea of creation. My grandfather would turn to an academician, Ye. Fersman, a great connoisseur of precious and semi-precious stones in the USSR. Academician Alexander Yevgenyevich Fersman was the creator of the classification of precious stones, which was adopted in the USSR. He did his best to examine the stone. Previously, he had experience studying the Jewish stone, which was found on the Kola Peninsula. At the time, he and other scientists were startled by the fact that mysterious inscriptions were not only on the surface of the stone, they went deep. If Hebraic granite was cut up, the writings could be clearly seen both on the top and on the lower sides. After careful research, he found out that crystals of feldspat and quartz would not fuse together chaotically in Hebraic granite, as it seemed at first. On the contrary, they fused together well and had a naturally determined mutual orientation. To learn the secret of Hebraic granite, there was only one way left. Besides the history of those distant times when Hebrew tribes lived, it was also necessary to turn to the most remote epochs when the process of the Earth's formation took place, when molten magma was breaking through the thickness of the ground here and there. If Hebraic granite was cut along frozen trickles of gray quartz, these trickles would look like sticks, as thick as a match in some places and as a pencil in others. When viewed in transverse thrust, quartz trickles looked like letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And what is surprising, these letters often go in straight lines as if they were written by a human being. Many peoples had a tradition of selecting specific gemstones for jewelry, associating them with magic and astral perceptions. Ancient people saw God's messages in these intricate drawings on the rock. Pegmatite was a sacred stone for many ancient peoples. For geologists, the magical properties of pegmatite are conditional upon one more unique feature. It is like a cradle for cultivating precious stones. In cavities formed in the structure of pegmatite, large crystals of topaz, beryl, aquamarine, garnet, and other precious stones grow. What is most surprising, mineral crystals are multifold bigger in pegmatites than in other rocks, e.g., in granites. Whereas in granites crystals do not usually exceed a few millimeters, in pegmatites the same minerals form crystals of a few centimeters or even meters. Features of the stone, given for a study by my grandfather, were different from the properties previously studied by A. Yi. Fursman Jewish stones, the difference was in hardness and cleavage. Hardness is a resistance a mineral surface shows when trying to scratch it with another mineral or other object. It is generally accepted to use the scale of relative hardness of minerals, proposed by the German mineralogist Mohs. Cleavage is an ability of minerals to crack or split by flat surfaces. Cleavage depends on the structure of the crystal lattice and the strength of coupling between the atoms in different planes. These figures, in the stone, given by my grandfather for study, were significantly higher than previously studied Hebrew stones. By its nature, it is similar to granite and is made up of quartz, feldspat and mica. It has blotches of others minerals that were not determined during the study of minerals. But it differs from granite with its amazing structure and composition, which includes feldspat, muscovite, quartz, biotite, and is characterized by a high content of CO, silicon oxide, volatiles and alkalis. Its acidity COIS 75%. This stone is not a mineral. As it is mainly enriched with Ca, calcium, Al, aluminum, C, silicon, it contains a large number of such elements as B, boron, B, beryllium, Li, lithium, Rb, rubidium, P, phosphorus, Cs, cesium, Mo, molybdenum, Ta, tantalum, Zr, zirconium, Hf, hafnium, Nb, niobium, U, uranium, Th, thorium. There are also other elements in it. It has been known as far back as from ancient legends, that the universe Stonius in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, alias Mount Moriah. Ad initium God created the heaven and the earth. At the time the earth was empty and chaotic, and darkness was upon the abyss, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters, Genesis 1:2. So begins the written Torah, and so it describes creation of the world from the first rose. Nowhere mentions it of the universe stone, the foundation stone of the earth. But in the oral Torah, which, according to a Jewish tradition, is passed down from generation to generation, the event of creation of earth is described in more detail. The oral Torah also repeatedly mentions the universe stone, the foundation stone of the earth, which was the starting point of creation of the world, and which holds the whole world. According to the oral Torah, God threw the stone in the sea of chaos, and this was where the existence of the world began. The oral Torah exactly specifies where the stone is at present, that is, where the creation of the world started. This place is Jerusalem, and specifically, Mount Moriah, which is located in this city. According to a Jewish tradition, Jerusalem traced its roots from the moment of world creation. The first and second Jerusalem temples were built above the stone. As the legend goes, there was the most holy place in the first and second Jerusalem temples above the universe stone. The tablets of the covenant, Moses received from the Almighty on Mount Sinai, were kept in the most holy place. The legend also states that the tablets consisted of two plates, cut out of the universe stone. There is the holy artiphorion in the middle of the temple, and there is the foundation stone under the holy artiphorion, which is the foundation of the world, Midrash Tenkuma, 5th century, AD. A great scientist of 12th century, Rambam, in his book, Beit Ha-Bira, about Mount Moriah says, "This is the place, where Abraham built a chapel of oblation and tied his son, Isaac, to it. At the same place Noah built his altar, when he came out of the holy artiphorion, and there stood the chapel of oblation, where Cain and Abel made sacrifices, and at the same place Adam made his sacrifice, the first man, there also was he born." The Jewish stone was in a ring of the famous warrior Genghis Khan. Princess Esther, Mordechai's cousin, also wore the stone. I had no idea how the Israeli descent leader, Benjamin, the warrior Genghis Khan, and Princess Esther, Mordechai's cousin, could be possibly connected with each other. While the leader of Israeli descent, Benjamin, and Princess Esther, Mordechai's cousin, are famous historical Jewish persons, the warrior Genghis Khan, from what I could learn at school and books in the Soviet Union, had no relation to the Jews. Everything was back in its place, and I realized the connection, when in 2003, I read a book, written by a Kharkov historian, Alexander Zinikov, Genghis Khan. This historian points out that the family of Genghis Khan was related to the ruler of Khazaria, Ashan, and his younger brother had the name of Khazar, great-grandfather's name was Kabir. A chronicler of those times, Juwayni, wrote in his History of the World Conqueror about Genghis Khan's appearance. Genghis Khan had gray, green eyes and long, pretty thick fair beard. He was tall. His wife Bort had also fair hair. The name Borte means blue, blue-gray. Genghis Khan himself also came from the line of Bortsiji, blue-eyed people. A historian, Paul Pelmo, believed that in the times of Genghis Khan in the steppes of modern-day Mongolia lived four peoples: Great Mongols, Tatars, and Merkitsan Makrites. He writes as Karites or Karaims. Makrites were also called Uyghurites. Was this not the origin of the name Uyghurs later? Historians suggest the Karaim origin of Genghis Khan. It is known that Genghis Khan lost his father early in life and was brought up by a Karaim Wan Khan. I could not obtain any reliable information whether the rings of these great people bore the same stone. Thousands of knights brought terrible disease. They were returning home from the Crusades to the Holy Land. The beginning of the disease was rapid and devastating in the middle of the 14th century. In 1347 the bubonic plague swept like wildfire across Europe. In France, only in Marseille, it killed 80% of the population for a few months. In 1347 the second and most terrible invasion of the plague began in Europe. For 300 years the disease was rampant, and took a total of 75 million lives to their grave. The disease spread to France after Italy. In Marseille, 56,000 people died for a few months. In Perpignan, only one doctor out of 8 survived. In Avignon, 7,000 houses went empty, and the local curate, out of fear, hit upon the idea to consecrate the river Rhône and drop all the dead bodies into it, causing infection of the river water. The plague, suspended the 100 Years' War between France and England for some time, claimed more lives than open clashes between the troops. At the end of 1348 the plague penetrated into the territory of today's Germany and Austria. Germany lost a third of doctors, many churches and temples were closed and no one was there left to preach and celebrate a church service. In Vienna, on the very first day of the epidemic 960 people died, and then 1,000 of the dead were taken out of the city every day. In 1349, as if satiated on the mainland, the plague spread across the strait in England, where the nationwide murrain began. Only in London more than half of its residents died. Then the plague reached Norway, where it was brought, as it is said, by a sailing ship, which crew all died from the disease. Once, the unmanageable ship was washed ashore, there appeared some people, who climbed on board to take advantage of the gratuitous booty. However, only half-decayed corpses and rats, running over them, were waiting for the thieves on the deck. The going over of the empty ship resulted in all the curious were infected, and transmitting the disease afterwards to sailors, who worked in the Norwegian port. The Catholic Church could not remain indifferent to such a terrible and terrifying phenomenon. It sought to give its own explanation of deaths. During sermons it called for repentance and prayers. The Christians saw in the epidemic punishment for their sins and prayed day and night for forgiveness. Big marches of worshippers and penitent people were organized. In Rome, crowds of half-naked and barefooted penitents roamed along the streets. They hung ropes and rocks on their necks, lashed themselves with leather whips, sprinkled ashes over their heads. Then, they crept to the steps of Santa Maria Church and asked the Holy Virgin for forgiveness and mercy. The madness, having seized the most vulnerable part of the population, was leading to degradation of the society. Religious feelings were transformed into dark insanity. As a matter of fact, in this period, many people really went crazy. It even came to a point that Pope Clement VI banned such marches and all kinds of flagellants. Those sinners, who did not want to obey the papal decree and called for physical punishment of each other, were soon thrown into prison, tortured and even executed. In smaller European cities, no one even knew how to fight against the plague, and felt that its main spreaders were terminally ill, e.g., ill with leprosy, the disabled and other frail people, suffering from all sorts of ailments. An established view, it was them who spread the plague. Possessed people to such an extent that wretches, mostly homeless vagrants, encountered ruthless people's wrath. They were banished from cities, they were deprived of food, and, in some cases, simply killed and buried in the ground. Later other rumors were spread. The plague was believed to be Jews' revenge for their expulsion from Palestine, for the bashings, and masses of people ganged up against the Jews with a new force. In November 1348, a wave of pogroms swept over the entire Germany. The Jews were literally hunted. The most absurd charges were brought against them. If a few Jews gathered together in a house, they would no longer allowed to leave it. Houses were burnt and those innocent people would be waited to burn to death. They were nailed in drums and lowered into the Rhine. They got imprisoned, let down on rafts down the river. However, the epidemic would not come down. In 1351, the persecution of Jews started to decline, and, in a strange way, as if on cue, the plague began retreating. People seemed to recover from madness, and gradually come round. European cities lost a total of a third of its population over the period of the plague cortege. But at that time, the epidemic spread to Poland and Russia. It is sufficient to recall Vagankovo Cemetery in Moscow, which, in fact, was built near Vagankovo village for burying plagued people. The dead were brought there from all over Moscow and Moscow suburbs and were buried in mass graves. I knew of this fact, not only from the stories of my father, but also from lectures and books I read during my study at medical university. This matter aroused interest in our family because, while transferring the ring with the stone to my grandfather, Yudovin said, the inscription on the stone specifies a unique recipe of medication, efficient not only against plague, but also against many other diseases in Hebrew. Solomon Borisovich suspected that his teacher was killed because he depicted the stone in one of his paintings, and, in order to prevent other people from death, Yudovinen crypted his suspicions and opinion on Ansky's death in his works he granted to my grandfather. This was all the information that we had. Given the fact that in the Soviet Union it was not possible to openly carry out a search, the pictures with an attached description have been kept in the folder all the time. After many years since my immigration, I put these pictures in frames and hung them on the wall in my office, as the memory of my father and grandfather. The article, which I read, stirred my memory, and I decided to continue the search. One day my father-in-law, Julius Israelovich, told me that my wife was a real princess. He said that quite seriously, and I could not help believing him. When I started asking him questions, and asked him to explain how this could be, he said the following. Our family of Mordikoviches have descended from the Jew Mordecai, who is described in the ancient scroll Magillat Esther. I have got acquainted with the story, described in Magillat Esther, thanks to my grandfather. I have not read the story myself, because in the years of my youth in the USSR, these books were not published. It was only after my immigration, when I got a chance to read what was not available to read in the Soviet time, I have learned and understood why it was particularly my wife who God decided to join me with. I have been looking for and collecting the crumbs of information relevant to the Jewish stone. Naturally, I was interested in information about Benjamin, the founder of Benjamin's descent, and the owner of 5 metal ring. According to the legend, he lost the stone during the battle. Another owner of the ring with the Jewish stone was a Jew Mordecai, who is described in the ancient scroll Magillat Esther. Unfortunately, the legend does not explain whether the Stoninhes ring is the same stone that Benjamin lost. The legend does not indicate whether Mordecai's ring, which the Jewish stone was embedded in, was made of 5 metals. But what makes me think that this is the same stone is that the stone has always striven to remain and has always remained, as confirmed by the words of the graybeard rabbi, who passed the stone to S.B. Yudavin with a behest to convey the Jewish stone to one of the descendants of Benjamin's generation, with the descendants of one generation of Israel. It is known from the documents that Mordecai was a descendant of Benjamin's generation. Mordecai came from Benjamin's generation and, therefore, he is presented in Magillat Esther as Ishiemani. His ancestors are a clan of descendants of Kish, who were driven out in exile by the Babylonian Emperor Nebuchadnezzar, together with the Jewish king exile Yehoiachin. Kish was one of the ancestors of Mordecai and was the father of King Saul. Mordecai, as the offspring of King Saul's family, who fought against Amalek and the king of Amalek Agag, first book of the prophet Samuel, ch. 15, continued the battle of his ancestor against the descendants of Amalek and the king of Amalek Agag. It is exactly what is told in Magillat Esther. When I asked my father-in-law in what way this relation with the family of Kish, and through him with Benjamin's family, is confirmed in generations, I was struck with the answer my father-in-law gave me. Periodically, all women of descendants of this generation obtain a peculiar mark on their hands at birth. This corresponds to the legend and traditions that are conveyed from generation to generation among the family. This answer struck me due to the fact that all male descendants of my family have a specific birthmark in the hip area. This phenomenon was noticed by my father the time he was a child yet, but I did not attach any special significance then. A genotype has its manifestation in the phenotype. The rules of genetics, heredity genes make us similar to our ancestors, and certain features are transferred from generation to generation. What I was told made me happy. My wife and I are descendants of the same Israel generation, the offspring of Benjamin's generation. Now I understood where her developed sense of foresight on events, the Sensito people's bioenergy and energy of things come from. No one of the people I know have ever had such a strong sense of intuition and the ability to foresee future events, moreover, to not only foresee, but also to affect the future. All her prophecies and wishes come true as if she were a witch. I have often told her that she would have been burnt at the stake in the Middle Ages for her superhuman abilities. She just smiles and says in response, constantly the same. I just foresee things for you and you are the one who complete everything. It was thanks to her suggestion that we left the Soviet Union and, as it turned out, it was very timely. Thanks to her suggestions and only thanks to her, did our family escape many situations where many other families got harmed during immigration. As it is said in the East, only a tree that does not bear fruit, is not thrown stones at. I believe that only because of Sveta people who were trying to throw stones at our family, very quickly regretted it, and disappeared from our life's journey. She is like a guardian angel for all of us. I, as a doctor, have always been concerned with the questions, how these unique abilities could appear in a human. Do all Jewish women have these abilities, or just my wife? But, perhaps, only God knows the answers to these questions. A team of experts from Langone Medical Center at New York University, NYU Langone Medical Center, in collaboration with the University in Tel Aviv have carried out identification of the Jewish nation at the genetic level. The scientists use technologies of modern molecular genetics, namely genome-wide analysis of single nucleotide polymorphism to assess the commonness of origin of the Jewish diaspora in different countries. And for good and all answer what binds Jews, genetic roots or just religion. The scientists took DNA for analysis from 7 Jewish populations, the Iranian, Iraqi, Syrian, Italian, Turkish, Greek and Ashkenazi Jews. Some of them, however, live in New York, but their grandparents on both sides come from the Jewish diaspora of the above countries. After careful selection, the experimenters ruled out family ties between the candidates, leaving only 237 out of 305 samples. For comparison, genetic scientists used the database on 4,000 Europeans, Asians and non-Jewish Americans. The scientists compared more than 360,000 SNPs in the studied genomes, using the method of DNA biochips, scattered throughout the genome variable regions where nucleotide substitution occurs. The results allow to infer of the genetic similarity more accurately than before, when the population analysis was performed on haplotypes of mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome. As the authors of the work say, the genomes of individuals, belonging to different populations of Jews, were grouped into appropriate clusters. But these DNA of different clusters were more like each other than like the DNA taken from the non-Jews. An origin from common ancestors was traced in all the clusters. The roots of the Jewish nation go back to the Middle East. While the differences accumulated over time due to the geographic and genetic isolation of individual populations. The most different from the others and most genetically close to Middle Eastern ancestors were the Iranian and Iraqi Jews. They form a group of Mizrahi, Jews from Islamic countries. European populations, the Sephardim, formerly expelled from Spain and settled in the southern European countries, and the Ashkenazi, who once lived in German lands, have acquired considerable genetic similarity with non-Jewish populations of South, Central and Eastern Europe. The admixture of European genes is estimated at 20–40% in them, hence the red hair and blue eyes. There is also an admixture of North African genes. Biologists have calculated that the Iranian, Iraqi and European branches of Jews broke off 100 to 150 generations ago. That is, since then, about 2,500 years have passed by. The first settled in Babylon and Persia, and have lived in that area so far, and the second ones migrated, or were expelled, from Palestine and settled across Europe. Among the European populations, Ashkenazi Jews differ with great genetic uniformity, according to the researchers. It seems that they are all relatives, maximum, in the fifth generation. Genetic scientists explain this with the fact that Ashkenazi went through several bottlenecks, when a population is greatly reduced in numbers, wars, epidemics, etc. Though then, Ashkenazi increased their number from 50,000 at the beginning of 15th century up to 5 million at the beginning of 19th century. The main conclusion made by the scientists lies in that although the Jewish diaspora consists of several geographically isolated groups, they are all tied with genetic threads and, therefore, with a common origin. Thus, the origin of Mordecai has attracted my attention a lot, especially his genealogy. It is little known about Yair, Mordecai's father. It is more known from Shmuel's, Samuel's, book about other relatives of Mordecai. King Saul's nephew, Shimei ben Gera, did not admit King David. He said about him all he thought without any respect. King David had an ample opportunity and the right to execute him, but he did not. King David vowed not to touch him. The reason for this act of the king is described in the Midrash. According to the written in the Midrash, King David had a prophetic dream, seeing which the king found out that from the offspring that would be produced by Shimei ben Gera, Mordecai would be born, who would save the Jewish people. Another ancestor of Mordecai, Kish, is mainly known as the father of the first Jewish king Saul. It is known from Shmuel's book that Kish's asses were lost, and he sent his son Shaul to find them. While searching, Shaul met the prophet Samuel, who anointed him for the kingdom. Shaul, having become the first Jewish king, like his ancestors had his own opinion on everything, his own special considerations, and stubbornly stuck to them. This led to him losing his kingdom. He lost his kingdom because of his stubbornness. He did not execute the requirements of the Torah. Stubbornness is a trait of the descendants of Benjamin, the son of Jacob, the ancestor of one of the generations of Israel. While Jacob's prior sons were born in the Galit, and in the Galit they were dependent on the mercy of the people around them. Benjamin was born when the people of Israel had crossed over Jordan. He was born free and freedom-loving. Perhaps, this was the reason why Mordecai, a descendant of Benjamin, did not bow before Haman, the minister of the king, as described in the ancient scroll Magillat Esther. The same traits are found in my wife, and, if to speak with self-criticism, in me, too. The only thing that saves us is that our attitudes and approach to many events and things coincide. As for my wife's capacity for foresight and prophecy, then, for certain, this has something to do with her affinity with Queen Esther. At the time, Queen Esther, who was a cousin of Mordecai, as a true prophet changed the law, which is specified in the Halacha. No wise man has a right to do so, only the prophet may amend or supplement the law. According to Halacha, it is prohibited keeping a fast for more than 2 days for reasons of threat to health. Esther's decision that was carefully performed by Mordecai and all the Jews, the fast lasts for 3 days. Such a decision could be taken only by a person with the gift of prophecy. I happened to unexpectedly open my wife's amazing ability, and her connection with the Jewish stone one day when I showed her a ring with the Jewish stone. Picking up the ring, she suddenly asked me, "Have you read what is written here?" I was very surprised. I have not been able to do so before. I asked her, "What do you see? Could you, please, read it for me?" "The land, milk and honey." I think the letters composing these words do attract attention. "Look," said Sveta, and she gave me the ring. No matter how hard I tried, I saw only what I had seen before. When we decided to immigrate to Israel, I remembered her words, "Israel is called the land of milk and honey," and it dawned on me that, perhaps, she had abilities, giving her an opportunity to come into a contact with the Jewish stone. This idea would not let me rest, and I decided to check my guess. I asked her, "We are leaving the town, which Israel city will we be living? Look at this stone in the ring, what do you see?" I gave her the ring with the Jewish stone, and she replied, "Jerusalem, see for yourself, this is written here." Subsequently, the ring was very helpful to us, and still helps us when we do not know what to do. Sveta has always found a solution in difficult situations based on clues, which the Jewish stone gave her. I have always seen, yes, I have, and I still see the same letters and combinations on the stone, and with all my desire I can never see what my wife sees and feels, coming in contact with the stone. It was very hair-raising to touch decayed dead bodies, and the government under the threat of incarceration forced ordinary people do so, who, taking that opportunity, engaged in looting at the same time. When it became impossible to find one, who, even under the threat of incarceration, would agree to carry out this terrible work, inmates became the choice of engagement. Thieves and murderers got the dubious chance of freedom. The government also engaged exiled to galleys convicts in collection and disposal of the dead bodies. The mortality rate was very high among those people. Only about 1/3 of them remained at their place, while the others either died or fled. Thieves, murderers and convicts from the funeral teams pilfered everything from houses, everything they could see. It was very often to happen that, in order not to go back into the house again, where sick and not dead people still were, they threw dying and dead people together into the same cart. Fake funeral teams appeared in the city. They would go from house to house, and, while the owners were absent, they would burgle the houses. The protection means against the disease consisted of an apron, cloth gloves and a cloth mask. Yet, all those virtually offer no protection from the disease. Over time, to protect themselves from infection, doctors began to wear purposely sewn long gowns, put on gloves on their hands and covered their faces with a special mask with a very long beak, which fragrant plants and roots were placed in. They roped their hands with plates on laces. There were incenses, emitting smoke on the plates. Sometimes it helped, but they appeared like monstrous birds, carrying misfortune with them. Their appearance was so terrifying that whenever they walked people ran away and hid. Nearly half the population of Marseille died within 6 months. Whole neighborhoods were lifeless in the city, and the wind was walking about the deserted homes. Soon, even the thieves and looters became afraid to enter rooms where the plagued people were taken out of. But there were 4 convicts, who without any consequences penetrated the plagued houses and looted them. Once, when they were caught with stolen jewels, they offered a recipe of remedy that had helped them avoid the disease in exchange for their freedom. Instead of sentencing them to death, they were offered a free pardon of all crimes they had committed and freedom for the secret remedy, which had helped them to survive while everyone around got sick and died. This secret, as it turned out, was transmitted as a legend in the family of one of the convicts, whose ancestor used to be a servant of the Knight of the Temple. When his landlord went down with the disease during the Crusades, the landlord got treatment from an old Jewish doctor. The servant of the knight prepared the remedy for treatment according to the doctor's recipe. Following the doctor's recommendation, the servant, in order not to be taken ill while caring after the landlord, started taking the remedy as well. The landlord recovered, and the servant did not become ill. Not only the family legend did save lives of the convicts caught at theft, but it also saved far more lives besides the Marseillaises. After massive application of this remedy, the plague in Marseille began to wane. All ingenious is usually very simple, so was the remedy recipe: garlic cloves, soaked in old wine. The infusion was taken by mouth, was used for washing hands, the face and neck, gargling the mouth. The convicts took the infusion as much as they wished, what is more, they did not miss out on it. In the years since, a number of doctors improved the recipe. Some replaced old wine with vinegar, others added different, as they believed, necessary ingredients. Still, garlic remained an unalterable element of the recipe. The remedy, having widespread in Europe after the plague in Marseille, consisted of a mixture of vinegar, camphor and finely powdered parts of many plants: sage, mint, rue, garlic, cinnamon, cloves, etc. This remedy was sold in pharmacies under the name of vinaigre de 4 voleurs, the vinegar of 4 thieves. This vinegar is consigned against any infection and contagious diseases, taken by washing hands and face, smoking in rooms and houses, pouring on a hot stone or iron, as well as smoking underwear and dresses. Weekly News of the Free Economic Society, Russia, 1789. It is hard to ascertain whether there is any connection between the recipe, having saved thousands of lives in Europe, and the knight, who brought the Jewish stone to the synagogue, but lots of coincidences in the stories of 2 historically true events clearly imply such a connection. The knight's recovery from the plague, his gratitude to the Jewish doctor for treatment, the defeat of the Order of Knights Templars, escape of many survived knights, including to the western Ukraine, where castles of the order were, explain the way the Jewish stone made it into the synagogue in the rabbi's hands. After the Crusades, the Knights Templars brought along taken artifacts from the Holy Land. Templars faithfully served Church of Rome, and it was the Church that played the devil with them. Over one night, the order was beheaded, the Grand Master was burnt, and the knights were accused of heresy and thrown in jail. However, the Templars were able to hide their treasures just in time. Those who could survive fled to other countries. The Templars even reached Ukraine. They fought in the armed force of Prince Danilo Galitsky and even erected castles in Ukraine. There are still walls of their old-time unapproachable fortress preserved in the village Srednyi in Transcarpathia. The Templars knew how to keep their secrets. They went away from here as mysteriously as they appeared. Some ancient stones with hewn Latin inscriptions and interwoven wreaths, poppy, tragedy, and blackthorn, death, were found in the village Novoselki near Zalakivo in Lviv region. According to researchers, this is a cipher key left by the Templars. Jewish penicillin, so my grandmother called chicken broth, and she called garlic as Jewish fat. We lived in Ukraine, and, as Ukrainians have always had a particular attitude towards pig fat, it was not only traditional food, but also a nationally respected product. I remember a lecture at Medical University at the Department of Internal Disease Propedeutics when Professor Stelmach was talking about the impact of pig fat on secretion of bile flow in the process of digestion. According to him, fat like a sponge squeezes bile from the liver, in so doing, facilitates its self-cleaning. At the same time, he, and it was in the early 70s, was at and was against using margarine in diet. His statements were confirmed in the 2000s, when the harm of transformed fats was determined. In general, Ukrainians are one of the most freedom-loving peoples. Their territory, Kiev, was the first where statehood originated, then it spread to the Russians' territory, Moscow. Later, the territory of Ukraine accommodated escaped bond people, the so-called slaves until 1861 in Russia. There was slavery in Russia, while, in the same year, in England the first underground line was launched. The most intelligent, freedom-loving, courageous and enterprising people fled to Ukraine from the bondage. Perhaps, the genes of these traits were passed on to their descendants. While pig fat, salo, is a favorite foodstuff with Ukrainians, garlic, in its turn, is a favorite foodstuff with Jews. Pig fat, salo, with garlic is a national recipe for how Ukrainians consume this product, and, maybe, the result of the Jews, living for thousands of years in Ukraine. They lived there as far back as Kiev was called Sarmata. They lived there when Jews were prohibited to live on the territory of Russia at the time of the Russian Empire, and they were allotted with living residences, limited to the official Pale of Settlement. Those residences, where Jews lived, were on the territory of Ukraine. Perhaps, that was how the two products were combined, the two products of two living together freedom-loving peoples. A lot of nations have disappeared from the face of the earth, and we know of them thanks to monuments they left, which are embodied in stone buildings or household items. The main historical and ever-living monument of the Jewish people, wherever they lived, is the Torah, and faith in God. Everything that is connected with the Torah, and everything that is written in the Torah, is sacred for every Jew. Garlic is described in the Torah as a product that helped Jews survive in the period of slavery in Egypt. I have always been amazed at the desire with which historians of different nations have been trying to show these nations come from some gods, heroes or natural phenomena, and only the Jewish people have been proud to say that they come from slaves, who with God's help escaped slavery in Egypt. According to the text of one of the chapters of the Torah, sulfur-rich vegetables took an important position in the Jewish diet during their Egyptian captivity. When the children of Israel together with Moses were wandering across the desert, they were starving, and they moved to complain, "We remember the fish, melons, onions and garlic, but now our bodies are dried up, our eyes can see nothing but manna." It is well known that fish is rich in phosphorus and vitamin A. Both of them have a beneficial effect on cardiovascular and immune systems. Cucumbers and melons perfectly purify blood and internal organs of toxins, while radishes, onions, leeks and garlic supplement a body with essential amino acids, which, in their turn, are necessary for growth of white blood cells, T lymphocytes and macrophages, suppressing all sorts of infections, as well as for general stimulation of the immune system. And all these are vital elements of our body. When Pharaoh would not let the Jews go free, the Egyptians were subjected to the 10 Egyptian executions. One of those executions was a punishment when all the firstborns in Egypt died. However, Jewish firstborn survived. As it is known from the Torah, God spoke to Moses, and Moses told the Jews what he heard, that they should eat roasted meat with vegetables and greens, and the recommended greens included onion and garlic. The Jews fulfilled what God instructed them to do, and it may have saved their firstborns. I have had one situation in my life that made me take seriously any of God's guidance and recommendations, and even if there is something unclear in them, it is still better to perform them than neglect them. Once I asked a very famous rabbi, the head of the Ramaster Hasidim in Israel, "Why does God forbid the Jews to eat fish that does not have fins and scales?" At first, the answer seemed to be not convincing enough for me as a doctor, despite me highly honoring and respecting the rabbi. May the memory of him live forever. Zikran Brak. He gave me his blessing, and it turned my whole life upside down. The answer was the following. God only knows of his intentions while he was creating these fish. We must believe God. The permanent secretary of Rabbi Meyer, who I have been on friendly terms with, a highly educated, well-bred, and, because of some special features, very interesting person who you can talk to on any topic, told me after that conversation with the rabbi. Do not jump to conclusions, Rabbi is right, the time will come and you will see for yourself. I find it difficult, as a doctor, even though I do believe in God, to accept something at its face value that is not confirmed by scientific research, namely the rabbi's words. But the time has come, indeed, researchers have shown that fish, living at the bottom of waters, that have no scales and fins, eat bottom food, containing decomposition products and nuclear fallouts, which have accumulated at the bottom of waters. Heavy metals and nuclear products accumulate in their bodies in a very large quantity, which makes the use of these fish as food very dangerous. Let me give more historical information about the use of garlic. Due to the widespread introduction of firearms, burns have become quite common, and surgeons have sought to improve methods of burn treatment. Traditional therapy has been limited to cooling ointments, and only a few doctors have used specific remedies. A French doctor, Ambrose Père, 1510 to 1590, read in a variety of herbals, which widely appealed to Dioscoride and Ramban, about the use of onion, garlic and honey in treatment of burn wounds. Applying only garlic and honey for several times, he discovered, to his astonishment, what was known 1,500 years ago. In 1537, in Piedmont, a young 27-year-old surgeon, Père, was summoned in Marshal Monteith's army during the Third War between Francis I and Carlos V. In the army, it was the first time he had ever applied an unusual combination of garlic and onion without squeezing the juice and without honey to a severe burn of degree 3. Here is his story about that accident, translated from Latin into English. One of Marshal Monteith's cooks accidentally fell into a cauldron with almost boiling cauldron oil. I was called for after the chemist, so that I would put a bandage. A village woman, walking in the vicinity, heard me asking for garlic and honey for a bandage, and persuaded me to use for the first bandage just mashed, slightly salted garlic and onion. I had to cover with them, relying on her rich and undoubted experience, the blisters and sores. Whatever it was, I agreed to apply her advanced method to that fatty cook. The next day, I would never find blisters on those spaces that were covered with garlic and onion, while uncovered spaces was like an enormous bubble. The effect of that improved medicine, based on the remedy offered to him by an illiterate peasant, more tested and checked than the recipe of Dioscoride, inspired Père to apply it again. Soon after that, he had the chance. A little bit later, one German, who was serving for Monteith's guards, had his loading case, which was full of gunpowder, get in the fire, so that his face and hands got terribly burnt. I was called for. I put mashed garlic and onion with some salt on one half of his face, and some garlic with honey on the other half of his face. While doing a dressing for the second time, it could be seen that where onion and garlic had been put on, almost no blisters and abrasions were left, and where garlic and honey had been applied, both blisters and abrasions filled me with a lot of anxiety. Since then, I have fully trusted the new medicine. The ancient Romans most widely and variously used garlic. They believed that garlic multiplied stamina, strengthened courage, and healed all diseases. That was why legionnaires ate garlic with bread so that their stamina would be strengthened. Gladiators sometimes chewed whole garlic bulbs in order to hold fast on the arena and despise death. Even some of the nobles drank garlic liquid medicine as an effective antidote against possible poisoning. Garlic was eaten by Roman planters and their slaves. The poet Virgil described garlic as the main diet component for saving the stamina of harvesters. Here is a slightly salted peak of the harvest season. Now even the cattle are seeking the cool of shade, and green lizards are hiding in the thick bushes. Teztal completely tired the hearts out of reapers, exhausted by violent heat with its spicy smells of garlic and thyme. Oddly enough, it may seem that the Romans sentenced criminals to a daily garlic diet, a pro criminum expiation alias. However, it can be assumed that their mystical attitude towards garlic played a big role while passing sentences, for it was considered a magical plant cleaner. Perhaps justice was guided by their desire to purify the convict from contamination rather than punish for sins, as biting spicy smells were often used in rituals of purification. Galen believed his liquid medicine to be the best invention, which was prepared as follows: 1 piece of garlic, 1 piece of incense, 1 piece of aloe, mix all of them with an egg albumen until they have the consistency of honey, and add a pinch of wild rabbit fur trimmings. This mixture showed good results even when treating traumatic brain injury in one gladiator. When you sit down to eat delicious food, you can quickly determine whether there is garlic in it. But why does a garlic bulb not produce any smell? Garlic contains chemicals which are separated from each other until a clove is peeled, cut out, and mashed. When you mash the garlic, an enzyme called alliinase comes into contact with a substance called alliin. An immediate reaction occurs, resulting in the formation of allicin, the source of garlic's smell and taste. When you bite off a piece of fresh garlic, it seems like allicin explodes in your mouth. Whether you like it or not, you will soon spread the smell of garlic around. Is it possible to somehow stifle the garlic smell coming out when exhaling? Try to chew a little parsley or cloves. Still, remember that garlic smell when breathing is mainly released from the lungs. When eating garlic, it falls through the digestive system into the blood, and thence into the lungs. So, when you are exhaling, the bitter smell of garlic is felt while breathing. Therefore, mouthwash or chewing parsley does not eliminate garlic smell emanating during exhalation. Is there a solution to this problem then? Not really. Although, when all around are eating garlic, the smell will probably be less noticeable. In many countries, it is difficult to imagine a meal without garlic. But even there, where people abstain from garlic consumption, many fans of garlic are convinced that the benefits of it outweigh any inconveniences. More clearly, the signs of prejudice to garlic were manifesting during the 17th century. Connoisseurs of herbs and herbal traders began to apologize about the odor emitted by garlic for the first time ever. A famous herbalist, Culpeper, in 1649, said that he was insulted by the befouling breath of a man who had eaten garlic. John Evelyn, who had been writing diaries throughout his life and left behind a lot of books on natural history, summed up the new opinion on garlic in his book Acetaria, a discourse of Saulet's, published in 1699. He wrote that the Spanish and Italians eat garlic, along with other products. Garlic is reputed to be an excellent drug, and there is no doubt that it can be eaten by villagers, especially those living in swampy and damp places, as well as by sailors, but, at the same time, he pointed out, we absolutely do not accept garlic to be present in salads as a condiment for the simple reason that it produces an intolerable and disgusting odor, for which it was so hated in the old days, because, as we read in the old books, the use of garlic is an element of punishment for those who have committed terrible atrocities. Be sure that garlic is not food for the queen and her palace. Therefore, in what follows, we assume that it is much better to use soft and tender Spanish garlic as a meal dressing than garlic, even in small quantities. Poet Shelley, while traveling across France, wrote home, "What do you think? Noble young ladies eat, you'll never guess, garlic." Thus, there was a huge difference between the British and other Northern European races, such as Germans, and peoples of the Mediterranean. If desired, garlic can be associated with a violent temper, warm blood and misconduct of the Southerners. As Mrs. Beeton wrote in her cookbook, which became the Bible for all housewives of the Victorian era, the smell of garlic is unpleasant and its presence is inadmissible at the English table, except for rare exceptions, if it is used in very small amounts. This point of view on garlic spread and was ingrained in all the British colonies in the New World countries. It is known that Hermes bestowed Odysseus with a miracle root, moly, that prevented the effects of any spells. When Odysseus and his companions found the way to the island of black magic, Aya, where sorceress Circe was reigning, she managed to poison almost all Odysseus's companions with a magical drink, which turned them into pigs. Odysseus, with the aim of avoiding himself the effects of her evil sorceries and saving his friends, threw the miracle herb moly in the magical drink, which broke the sorceries and took the magical curse off all over the island. Hence, not for nothing garlic has been famous as a magical shield against any witchcraft and the evil eye. Allium moly is one of the species of garlic. A pig, according to the Torah, is a non-kosher animal, while garlic, as we can see, is a means of protection against it. The ancient Jews were seriously afraid of the evil eye and sought in every way to protect themselves from its effects. Rich and successful people tried to hide their achievements so as not to attract the evil eye. This belief was so strong that in the Talmud we can find a curious statement that 99 cases of deaths out from 100 happened because of the evil eye, and only one case, of natural causes. Consequently, as far back as in the earliest periods we find a confirmation that people tried to defend themselves from the evil eye. It turns out that garlic contains special phytoncides capable of destroying any germs, viruses, fungi, harmful to humans. This is some kind of garlic. Antibiotics of the highest standard. While carbolic acid kills tubercle bacillus for 1 day, sulfuric acid, for 30 minutes, for garlic phytoncides, it is a 5-minute task. Eating garlic, we strengthen our valve system. Our organism, for example, needs an element called germanium, as already mentioned above. However, it is found only in a single product, garlic. Germanium provides strength of spring systems, of valves of our body. These are reflux valves on the veins, raising blood from the legs to the heart, and so on. It is a never-ending story about garlic, but no matter what we say, it has not helped get closer to unraveling what is hidden in Yudovit's paintings and what power the Jewish stone has. Of course, we have found that the ancient recipe, vinegar de Cotters voleurs, is linked to the Knight Templar, who survived the plague, and ascertained that the same knight left a stone with Hebrew inscriptions on it in the synagogue, in western Ukraine. However, it is likely that our attempt to decipher the secret of the stone and to use the recipe as a starting point, thanks to which the knight survived, and thousands of lives were saved in Europe, is not correct, and it is necessary to change the search direction. Scarcely will a rational scientific approach help here. Rational 19th and 20th centuries, all, has made things as clear as a bell, as well as having raised a solid wall between the live and the lifeless, having built seemingly an indestructible tower of what could be, having thrown away all that will never be. The primitive unity of man and nature, a living and an alive, began breaking down as science has been developed. A scientist, like Pushkin's Salieri, having mortified the nature, cut open like a corpse, and checked the presence of harmony with algebra. German physicist, W. Voigt, 1850–1919, described this method in the appendix to crystals as, a physicist is not interested in a crystalline individual with its beautiful and unique clothes, naturally distributed facets, edges, corners, but in a crystalline substance, which he is exploring. He starts his work with ruthlessly stripping the substance off its clothes, cutting open the crystal into drugs that seem to him the most suitable for detecting properties of the crystalline substance in their pure form. The baggage of information, accumulated by mankind, underwent through separation into facts, what the scientists were able to verify, and idle fictions, superstitions, what could not be directly verified. Well, what is it exactly, the Jewish stone? What role has it played in the lives of its owners? Why is it the sixth element in the ring of 5 metals, described in Kabbalah? Why has this stone, as a living being, been trying to reach descendants of Benjamin's generation? As a rule, each stone has properties of both a talisman and an amulet. Unfortunately, these two different concepts are often confused even in reputable encyclopedias, not to mention people. Talisman strengthens and supports certain characteristics, traits, it contributes to their development, draws influence from the outside, as it were forming a microclimate favorable for manifestation of these characteristics. An amulet is destined to protect the owner from undesirable influences from the outside. It also restrains and smooths internal incentives, which can do harm to the owner. It improves the immune system, helps the body struggle problems in its systems. An amulet facilitates concentration of the subconscious sphere to pick up the first signs of impending danger, not yet visible to the active consciousness, promotes a delivery of instinctual impulses out from the subconsciousness that motivate a person to escape from the threat, leave an unsafe place. Benjamin's ring differed from the five-metal ring, described in Kabbalah, with presence of the sixth element, the Jewish stone. The presence of the sixth element made the ring a ring of 6 elements. What properties did the ring gain or lose at that? This stone brought truly great properties into the ring. It broke the wall between the live and the lifeless, between a man and a stone. Let's compare a crystal of a stone with a body. The main difference is how each of them keeps the shape, a crystal and a body. The crystal has a static equilibrium, while there is a dynamic equilibrium in a living body. Perhaps, that's why pentameral symmetry developed in nature, a starfish, the structure of some viruses and proteins, forbidden in crystals. According to crystallographers and geochemists, the crystallographic band of the pentamerous axis is determined by impossibility of its congruence, as well as axes of the kind higher than 6, with a lattice state of the crystal matter. Hence, it can be assumed that the pentameral symmetry axis in small organisms is a special instrument in the struggle for existence, insurance against petrification or crystallization, the first step, which would be taken by a lattice, to capture a living organism. However, since both the crystal and the body belong to the class of self-organizing systems, there are a lot of similarities among them. A living organism responds to environmental factors. The crystal also responds. When pressing crystals of stasphurite, tourmaline, topaz, quartz, there is a piezoelectric effect, charges on the surface, pressure figures appear, the piezo-optical effect. Crystals are sensitive to changes in temperature. When heating a crystal of tourmaline, electric charges will appear on its surface with a difference of potentials up to 1.2 kV, the pyroelectric effect. The sensitivity of a tourmaline crystal is very high, it registers temperature fluctuations of up to 10 degrees. When electrifying a crystal, its temperature will change, the electrocaloric effect. Pyroelectric and electrocaloric effects are mutually reversible, just as so reactions of the organism. Crystals are able to catch a cold and be sick. Think, for instance, of the tin plague. The crystal modification of tin is unfluctuating only at the temperature higher than plus 13.2 degrees. At much lower temperature tin can catch a cold and come apart into an amorphous modification. One of the reasons of the tragedy of Robert Scott's expedition to the South Pole in 1906 was the fact that the fuel cans sealed with tin were destroyed while exposed to cold. Resistance of the organism to diseases can be enhanced by activation of the immune system, in particular by introducing to the diet an extra amount of certain microelements, copper, zinc. Crystals also have an analog of immunity. An insignificant amount of bismuth added to tin reliably prevents the tin plague. The organism reacts to external influences in a complex manner. An anisotropic crystal is also able to respond in a complex manner to a force exerted upon it. When compressed, it shifts to the side, when moved, it also stretches. The organism absorbs the outside energy and transforms it. Some crystals have similar properties. Tourmaline directly converts thermal energy into electrical energy. Ruby has the property to absorb electromagnetic waves, radio waves and light, turning them into coherent radiation beams. In the case of radio waves, it works as a maser, a quantum amplifier of radio waves, in the case of the light, as the source of a laser beam. This is some kind of energy metabolism at the level of a crystal. The logic goes minerals, having an analog of such a complicated human complex as memory, is out of the question. But, crystals of bromide silver in photographic emulsion can remember a picture captured by them for many years, and show it when developed in the form of a photograph. Nitinol, the titanium alloy with 45% of nickel, remembers its initial shape. Products made from it after plastic, as it may seem, irreversible, deformation upon heating recover its initial shape. This property of nitinol is widely used in automatic relays of firefighting devices and antennas of spacecraft. The most overwhelming feature of memory has been opened by a group of French biologists led by Jacques Benvenisti in liquid mineral, water. Investigating the effect of allergens on one of the elements of blood, basophils, they have found that water, after the allergen has been removed from it, continued to impact the basophils, as if the allergen was still in it. There is no point in doubting the accuracy of the experiment. The dilution was adjusted to 1:10 superscript 2, even cosmogony does not operate with these numbers. Let's remember that 1 gram mole of a matter contains only 6.06 times 10 superscript 2 superscript 3 molecules. The researchers have obtained the molecular effect, without a single molecule of its bearer. Water has somehow remembered it. The author of the finding, Jacques Benvenisti, has metaphorically reflected himself the improbability of the precisely established fact. The given experiment can be compared to as though we, after shaking the car keys up in the Seine, under the Pont Neuf in Paris, tried to start the car, not any other car, but this particular car, having collected a few drops of water from the Seine in Le Havre. Let's now turn to crystal matters. Herbal therapy by applying rubbing with active matters does the same thing. There is no molecule of an active principle in homeopathic medicine, yet there is an effect. Consequently, a crystal is also able to remember such a delicate and complex thing as a structure of the matter, coming in contact with it. There is an analog of compatibility of characters in the world of crystals, epitaxy. Crystals, having a one-type lattice, can grow on each other. For example, potassium alum grows on chromium, and sodium chloride grows on potassium chloride. All these examples only cut through the windows in the wall between the live and lifeless without destroying it. The static analogues of dynamic phenomena in the organism are found in a rock. Dynamic phenomena, processes, not states, are commonly found, however, in crystals. Like a living organism, a crystal can grow, eat, and reproduce. A technique of crystal growth is similar to the technique of reproduction of deoxyribonucleic acid in a living cell, a self-completing spiral assembly of proteins on the steps of this spiral staircase. As crystallographers, G. Lemline, 1901–1963, and F. Frank showed, a crystal also grows from a solution along a spiral as if it was reeling up on itself, moving ahead and above the same step, increasing the number of turns in the spiral. The boundary between a crystal and a cell lies here in the fact that in a crystal, growth and self-assembly are quantitative in nature, whereas in a living cell they are qualitative. However, the analogy is obvious. All the above indicates that the nature, having fumbled certain mechanisms in a lower self-organizing system, a crystal, has used them when engineering a self-regulating system of a higher level, a living organism. The theory of self-organizing systems claims that the two systems, having some general building principles, are able to interact with each other. Theoretically, therefore, a person and a crystal can interact with each other. 59 As in a living organism at the cellular level, there are microdefects, appearing in a crystal, and in proper conditions they develop, dislocations and point defects. That is where, based on one of the most amazing similarities between a crystal and a body, a physical possibility of their interaction emerges. The processes of emergence and disappearance of microdefects in a crystal are as dynamic as in a living system. A rock, despite its apparent inertness, immobility, seems to be living its inner life. Point defects, out-of-position electrons and atoms in a crystal lattice, and dislocations, local distortions of the structure, do not stay in one place, they move, sometimes very quickly. By running, they meet each other, interact, sensitively respond to external influences. A crystal continuously interacts with the environment. In so doing, there may arise vibrations of various kinds, radiations. The very laser on a ruby, a crystal continually sends information to the external environment. The wall between man and a stone appears to be transparent, allowing the exchange of information. Is there any objective evidence of the presence of information exchange between man and a stone? Yes, there is. This is indicated by the existence of such, not comprehensively studied yet, a phenomenon of biolocation, radioesthesia, dowsing. A trained person is able to, with the use of a simple tool. In addition, it is unclear how it works, a fork, bent spoke, frame, detect minerals, ores, lying under the ground. Experts claim that 90% of all people in one way or another have dowsing abilities, and developing them is a matter of a workout. Some scientists, though still few, believe that the main carrier of information is microlepton structures, made of microparticles that are significantly lighter than electrons, something like neutrinos. These structures somewhat copy the structure of their carrier and, like a cloud, surround the body, including the human body. So why not assume the interaction of the information flows of a human and stone, 60 especially if the biorhythms of both of them accorded, got used to each other. According to ancient treatises, stones are capacitors of cosmic radiation energy of 7 types. Although modern science lacks knowledge of these 7 radiations, except for cosmic rays of the 2 types, microwave background radiation, microwave radiation of Jupiter and Saturn, and besides a recently shown unverified report on a strange stream of rays from the neutron double star Hercules X1, generating the Earth's surface gamma rays. The total power of all these ray flows is negligible if compared to the solar radiation energy. According to Kabbalah, a ring of 5 metals is to be made under the sign of Jupiter, and is connected to it energetically. The Jewish stone binds human biorhythms and Jupiter energy flows. This is the meaning of the 6th element, the Jewish stone, inserted in the ring of 5 metals. Since the second half of the I millennium and, especially, in the Middle Ages, the opinions on doctors and protective properties of the stone were particularly strong, wherein much credit must go to scientists and philosophers of the time. For instance, the famous physician of the Renaissance, Paracelsus, 1493 to 1541, in the words of Herzen, the first professor of chemistry since the creation of the world, believed in the power of semi-precious stones, making extensive use of them in various ointments. Dr. Paracelsus centered around astrological modeling principles when treating diseases, simply said, on the concept of friendship and animosity of planets, responsible for, in his opinion, a particular disease. He did not understand the fundamental nature of diseases. Microbes were discovered by Leeuwenhoek as early as in 1683, and the etiology of many diseases has been still studied. Though, as back as in the 15th century, they were recommended to treat a disease, related to the jurisdiction of any planet, medicines, or herbs, of its planet antagonist. Poisoning with lead compounds, Saturn 61 metal, causes the so-called lead gout. The symptoms are very similar to the real gout, caused by formation of uric acid stones in the joint fluid. The antagonist of Saturn, which, according to Paracelsus, is responsible for developing of rheumatic diseases, and Mars, which, according to Paracelsus, is responsible for developing of inflammatory skin diseases, is the Sun. Now it chanced that preparations of gold, the metal of the sun, chrysanyl, myochrysane, sanchrysane, solganol, note, developed only in the XX century, are effective in the treatment of chronic rheumatic arthritis, Saturn, and erythematous lupus erythematosus, Mars. Astrological correlations, planet, metal, stone, may reflect not yet known to science natural relations. Probably, there is some, not yet studied relation between the metal setting of the ring and embedded in its stone. According to Paracelsus, the Sun, Moon and neighborly planets comprise most of the stones with their influence, therefore, gold and silver are really a universal setting. While a setting of 5 metals is suitable to Jupiter, therefore, the Jewish stone as well, pegmatites. For more than 50 minerals are successfully used in medical practice of modern medicine. We have not yet, or already, studied a lot of features of a rock. They still need to be learnt. There is a grain of truth in legends. A number of examples can be given. As far back as in the ancient times, healers noticed some stones were bactericidal. The same has been noticed present-time scientists. Water with such stones in it will not spoil for a long time, on the contrary, it may even heal dyspepsia, and when wounds are damped with it, they will heal faster. Chalcedony, thrown into rotten water, will make it suitable for consumption without boiling after 3 to 5 days, depending on the volume of water and size of a stone. Furthermore, even the rotten smell disappears. It is no accidental that when building artificial reservoirs and the bottom and walls are cemented in, a direct contact of the 62 stone or sand with water disappears, and water becomes moldy. Some way or other, all sciences took their rise from magic. Although its canons have always been kept a strict secret, many of them were irretrievably lost at the time of the past centuries. Black magic is prohibited with Jews, while magic, associated with healing practice, just on the contrary. There is a lot of evidence in the Talmud and in books of the wise. First and foremost, Jews have firmly believed in demons and evil spirits for ages, since the time of the First Temple, and in practice it never conflicts with monotheism. The only thing in Judaism that is never done, there are no spells with the name of God. It is, indeed, appropriate to conjure with the names of angels, but never with the name of God. The Oriental Jews have better developed the culture of mascots adornments. The Ashkenazi have more books, paper amulets. It is where the legend comes from. It was this mineral, the Jewish stone, Moses' tablets were made of. According to the Pentateuch, the first tablets Moses received from God were made of sapphire, which is also a stone belonging to Jupiter. It is believed that plates of the Jewish stone, as already mentioned, the name of graphic pegmatite, were used to teach students to read in ancient times. Another argument, except for the appearance, in favor of this, the antiquity of the mineral. Geologists believe that it is as old as the Earth's crust. This mineral, as well as the Earth's crust, is about 3 billion years old. So, plates of the Jewish stone are more than good to keep writings of the Revelation on them. Since ancient times, people have believed in their lucky stone. They wore it, conforming to their weaknesses and diseases, the month of birth and signs of the zodiac, astrological predictions and other numerous written and unwritten rules. Owners of mascot stones felt a special godsend power in them. 63 apparent one-year movement of the Sun among the stars, as it is known, occurs by a large circle of the celestial sphere, the ecliptic. To better navigate in the star ocean, astronomers have divided it into 88 constellations. Approximately 2,500 years ago, again, as a matter of convenience for counting the position of the Sun on the ecliptic was divided into 12 equal parts by 30 degrees in each, which the Sun goes through at a certain time of the year. Each such an arch was assumed to be marked with a sign of the constellation, which the Sun was passing through at the time. The 12 of such constellations were named zodiacal. That was how the signs of the zodiac originated. The vernal equinox was assumed as a reference point, which was in the beginning of the new era in Aries constellation. The arch, measured from it and equaled 30 degrees, was conferred with this sign, corresponding to 21.03, 19.04. Then, arches of 30 degrees, respectively belong to the zodiacal constellations: Taurus, 20.04 to 20.05, Gemini, May 21, 21, 06, Cancer, 22.06 to 22.07, Leo, 23.07 to 22.08, Virgo, 23.08 to 22.09, Libra, 23.09 to 22.10, Scorpio, 23.10 to 21.11, Sagittarius, 22.11 to 21.12, Capricorn, 22.12 to 19.01, Aquarius, 20.01 to 19.02, Pisces, 20.02 to 20.03. So far, the total displacement of the vernal equinox point, the reference point of zodiac signs, due to precession, has reached nearly 30 degrees, moves by 1 degree every 72 years, over 2,000 years, in other words, the dimension of the arch equaling to one zodiac sign. Notwithstanding, paying tribute to the tradition, we have continued to believe that there have been no changes. While, in fact, the picture is now different. Sagittarius, 18.12 to 19.01, 64 Capricorn, 19.01 to 16.02, Aquarius, 16.02 to 12.03, Pisces, 12.03 to 18.04, Aries, 18.04 to 14.05. Taurus, 14.05 to 21.06, Gemini, 21.06 to 20.07, Cancer, 20.07 to 11.08, Leo, 11.08 to 17.09, Virgo, 17.09 to 31.10, Libra, 31.10 to 22.11, Scorpio, 22.11 to 30.11. Beginning from 30.11 up to 18.12, the Sun is in the constellation of Ophiuchus, which is not included in the zodiac signs. All this makes it very difficult to choose stones according to the sign of the zodiac, based on the normal calendar, yet fortunately, it does not create difficulties when using the Hebrew lunar calendar. Different peoples assigned all known semi-precious stones among the 12 signs of the zodiac. At first, following a Jewish tradition, one stone was devoted to the zodiac sign and month. However, every nation had their sympathy. It is also true that they changed time after time, and then there were new stones, devoted to one or another sign of the zodiac. The Jews were split up into 12 descents, or generations, the sons of Jacob. Each generation had their own symbol, one of 12 known at the time gems. The ceremonial vestments of Aaron the high priest consisted of an ostentatious breastplate. The list of regularly placed 12 gems on it, which symbolically represented the 12 generations of Israel, is one of the first literary references of precious stones. The breastplate of the high priest is a linen bag, adorned with 12 precious stones, flat, oval, placed in filigree gold settings. There are the names of the Israel generations engraved on the stones. There is also a reference of various stones, which served as closings for sacred vestments. Set in gold, they were located on the shoulders, while the breastplate was attached to them with 65 linen ribbons. In the English version, these stones are onyxes, in early Greek translation, emeralds, and Josephus Flavius calls them as sardonyx. Christianity, following the Jews, also associates a number of semi-precious stones with the apostles and the saints. Stones specified the Christian symbolism: black, jet, obsidian, death, mourning, green, emerald, jade, hope, joy, white, rhinestone, purity, virginity, red, ruby, bohemian garnet, martyrdom, anguishes, greatness. The Talmud, the sacred book of Jews, also indicates therapeutic effects of stones. For example, a stone amulet, which was worn by Abraham, San 68a, was credited with such force that it was enough for a patient just to look at it in order to immediately recover. Later, in Christian legends, this healing property was transferred to the emerald cup of the Holy Grail. Wise Jewish King Solomon had several rings with different stones, which united the ancient symbol of power and mystery forces. As I already mentioned, my grandfather sought an advice of academician A.Y.E. Fersman, a great connoisseur of precious and semi-precious stones in the USSR. Alexander Yi was a creator of the precious stone classification, which was adopted on the territory of the USSR. Previously, he had some experience exploring the Jewish stone, which is found on the Kola Peninsula. According to him, as far as at the time, he was taken aback not only with the mysterious inscriptions inserted on the stone surface, but also with the fact that the brought sample emitted a sharp smell of garlic when being hit. Conducted follow-up studies showed that the sample brought together with the Jewish stone contained arsenic pyrite, from arsenicum, the Latin name of arsenicum, and Brazil, arsenic iron, mispickel, a mineral from the sulfo-arsenic iron compounds group. The chemical 66 composition is FeASS. Usually, contains alloys of isomorphic nature, cobalt, nickel. Forms a range, arsenic pyrite, up to 3% Co, danalite, up to 12% Co, glaucodot, more than 12% Co. The system is monoclinic, according to the most recent data, triclinic. Forms pseudorhombic, prismatic, columnar and needle-like crystals, star-shaped growths, columnar and grain-like aggregates. The shine is metallic, the color, tin white. The hardness, according to Mohs scale, is 5.56. The density is 5,900 to 6,200 kilograms/m3. When hit, emits a sharp garlic smell. It is found in or streaks together with lead sulfides, zinc, bismuth, as well as with wolframite, cassiterite, native gold, and others. It is found in pegmatites. The fact that the stone has unsolved Jewish inscriptions, besides the garlic smell, which, for as long as since the days of Horus, has been associated with Jews, according to Horace, the garlic smell of Jews was called Judeophoidans, stinking Jews, ruled out any doubts that this stone is connected to the Israel generations. Further studies allowed pegmatite to be separated from arsenic pyrite, but the story, which Alexander Yi Fersman told my grandfather, influenced our search for clues to the Jewish stone and Yudevin's paintings. The garlic smell, Fersman mentioned of, allowed us to learn more about garlic and the history of the Knight Templar, who brought this stone to the territory of Ukraine. Yuri Peng. Mystery of the Unsolved Murder. Here's an article that I have read on the internet, and now I fully present it herein. In the appendix to this book, you can find an electronic website address where this article and information were taken from. 1. The Mystery of the Unsolved Murder of Yuri Peng. Devoted to the 75th anniversary of the murder of Yuri, Judel, Yehuda, Peng, the artist, teacher, one of the founders of the Jewish Renaissance, in the art of the early 20th century. Alexander Ostrovsky 10, 2012. Published, September 3, 2012. The 10th, early orphan child, coming from a poor family that lived in the Lithuanian territory. As early as in his childhood, Peng showed talent for drawing. While studying in Heder, a Jewish religious elementary school, he would enjoy portraying his friends. He would have his hands beaten for that with a stick. According to Judaism religion, it is prohibited to draw people. Necessity forced him to go and work as an apprentice for a painter. Still, the desire to become an artist never left him, and Peng was lucky enough to enter the St. Petersburg Academy of Arts. He studied with the famous painter Pavel Chistiakov, met other students, Serov, Vrubel, Maimon. He was awarded with a silver medal for his portrait of Yehuda drawn from life. Over time, he renamed himself as George. After graduating from the academy, the artist worked for Baron Northkorff at his estate. At the estate, he met the governor of Vitebsk V.A. Levashov, who invited him to move to Vitebsk and open a drawing and painting school. Starting from 1896 until his death, Peng had lived in this city. He occupied a large apartment in a house on Gogol Street, where his workshop was, too. A good 100 of young artists were enrolled and graduated from Peng's school. That was where creative biographies of Lazar Lisitsky, Solomon Yudovin, Zaire Asgar, Osip Zadkin, and Mark Chagall began. Peng, like most Jews, enthusiastically accepted the revolution. It was to turn the Jews into full-fledged citizens, destroy the Pale of Settlement, and get rid of the pogroms. In 1918, such famous artists as Malevich, Dobuzinski, Falk, and Chagall, whom Lunacharsky appointed as the commissioner on art, came to Vitebsk with a visit. No later than the first anniversary of the revolution, the city had become a center of artistic avant-garde. The Folk and Art College was opened in Vitebsk, and Peng was appointed as the principal of it. In 1927, he was awarded the title Honored Jewish Artist of the Vitebsk region. The news of the terrible death of 82-year-old Peng on March 1, 1937, instantly spread through Vitebsk. It was said that he was killed with an axe, and the entire floor and walls were splashed with his blood. Responsibilities to carry out a crime investigation were allocated upon the NKVD department, which was headed by Ivan Gorbelinia. The suspicion fell on the artist's relatives, the Feinsteins. Peng's cousin was adjudged the organizer of the murder, and her son and daughter were adjudged assassins. Overall, 9 people were arrested. During the preliminary investigation, all the suspects confessed in participation in the murder of the artist. Looking ahead, it should be noted that during the court hearings, the arrested waived their statements, explaining that they were tortured to give such statements. Notwithstanding, 6 of them were sentenced to various terms of imprisonment. The investigator Protulyak came from Minsk to sign the indictment. Immediately after he began to study the case, he found out that the evidence had disappeared, and the results of fingerprint expertise were no longer available. It appears that the investigation was not concerned about the search for the killer but the attempt to create a high-profile case with condemning a large number of the accused, said M. Piskilyanak, the head of the Town Council Archive Department of Vitebsk. Indeed, if the murder had been committed for robbery, why was the money kept in the bedside table left untouched? Perhaps the relatives expected to come into Peng's paintings? Yet, they knew that he bequeathed his works to Vitebsk. And indeed, the murder of the famous artist would bring no benefit to his relatives because the old man was helping them with money. Perhaps the answer to the crime should be sought in Peng's past. Investigator Protulyak managed to find out that before the revolution, the artist had painted in the nude style. Such pictures Peng kept in a special room that few knew about. A lot of girls, including ladies from the upper crust, sat for his models. The daughter of the Vitebsk Governor-General turned out to be among them. In the mid-30s, a new chief of NKVD arrived in Vitebsk, senior lieutenant of KGB Gorbelinia, who visited Peng's workshop. Looking at the images of naked women, he suddenly got petrified in front of one of them. The very governor's daughter was depicted in it. He asked Peng to sell the painting but was refused. The Minsk investigator continued the investigation, and he was able to figure out that 2 portraits disappeared from the artist's workshop, one of a naked woman and the other of one of Peng's students. Fortunately, a sketch of the portrait of an unknown woman had been preserved. Barely glancing at it, Protulyak remembered where he had seen the woman, in the office of the chief of NKVD. Then a guess crossed the investigator's mind that Gorbelinia was afraid of publicity. Perhaps that was the portrait of the naked woman that became the reason for the artist's murder. Now it became clear to Protulyak why the investigation was carried out so negligently and why the fingerprints of the suspects were missing. After returning to Minsk, Protulyak wrote a report to his superiors, in which he outlined his suspicions. The killer could be one of the former Peng students, whose portrait had been gone, and Gorbelinia used it for his own purposes. After 2 days, the investigator was found at home with a bullet passed through his head. Yet, the head of Vitebsk NKVD could not escape vengeance. A few years later, he was arrested and shot dead. Perhaps some may think that the version shown here is far-fetched, and definitely, that was not the portrait of the naked woman that caused the death of the artist. Maybe he was just a victim of the mass repressions in 1937. KGB archives might help to answer these questions, but they are not available to historians. After Peng's death, there was created his art gallery in Vitebsk. From 1939 to 1941, there were exposed about 800 works of the artist. Since the beginning of the war, the collection was evacuated to Saratov. After 1945, only a small part of the works returned to Vitebsk. The rest were gone. Last year, a restoration of Yuri Peng's paintings was completed in Vitebsk, and now the most important collection of the artist's paintings is presented in the Vitebsk Art Museum. Yuri Peng returned to the city, which he was so fond of.